Two elite units, both legendary, both trained specifically for the most high-stakes operation any Special Forces soldier will ever execute. Hostage rescue. The mission where failure is not measured in objectives, lost or territory surrendered. Failure is measured in innocent bodies. When you have hostages held by armed captors in a fortified location, you get one chance, one breach. One moment where everything must go perfectly, or people die. Both American and British Tier 1 units have conducted real-world hostage rescues that have become the stuff of legend. Both have training programs specifically designed to produce operators capable of the impossible. But when NATO conducted a joint hostage rescue evaluation exercise, something happened that nobody anticipated. Something that forced a complete reassessment of how one of these units approaches the most critical seconds of any hostage rescue operation. The results were so shocking that the phrase total disaster appeared in internal communications. And before you assume you know which unit failed, I need you to understand that the unit that struggled was executing their doctrine perfectly. They did exactly what they were trained to do. That is precisely why the exercise exposed a gap so fundamental that it changed how NATO thinks about hostage rescue. Let me tell you about hostage rescue doctrine because understanding this is essential to understanding what went wrong. Hostage rescue is unlike any other special operations mission. In a standard direct action raid, speed and violence of action are almost always advantageous. The faster you move, the less time the enemy has to react. The more aggressive your approach, the more you overwhelm their decision-making capacity. This doctrine has proven devastatingly effective across thousands of operations. Hostage rescue inverts this logic in critical ways. Yes, you need speed. Yes, you need violence of action. But you also need precision that is almost surgical. The hostage takers are not your primary concern. The hostages are. Every round fired must account for what is behind the target. Every movement must account for where hostages might be positioned. Every flashbang must account for hostage locations. The margin for error is measured in centimeters and milliseconds. Here is the critical distinction that matters for our comparison. There are two fundamental philosophies in Western hostage rescue doctrine. The first philosophy prioritizes overwhelming force and speed. Enter with maximum violence, eliminate all threats as rapidly as possible. Accept that the chaos of the initial breach is the most dangerous moment and push through it as fast as possible. The logic is that a fast, aggressive rescue gives hostage takers no time to execute hostages. Enter with calculated force, identify and engage threats with deliberate accuracy, maintain situational awareness throughout the operation to track hostage positions, accept a slightly longer operation time in exchange for greater precision. The logic is that controlled precision reduces the risk of friendly fire casualties and allows adaptation to unexpected hostage positions. Neither philosophy is wrong. Both have produced successful real-world rescues. But when you put both philosophies into the same exercise scenario, the differences become dramatically apparent. And one philosophy proved catastrophically unsuited to the specific scenario NATO designed. The exercise was designated Operation Certain Freedom. Location was a purpose-built training facility designed to replicate a commercial building in a European urban environment. 4 floors. Multiple rooms per floor. Complex internal layout with limited sightlines and multiple potential hostage-holding locations. 12 hostages played by role players equipped with laser detection systems. 8 hostage takers similarly equipped. The rules of engagement were simple. Any hostage hit by a training round was considered a fatality. Any hostage taker who was not neutralized within 2 seconds of initiating hostile action was considered to have executed their hostage. The scenario was designed to test the absolute limits of hostage rescue capability. 3 units participated. American Delta Force, British Special Air Service, German GSG-9. Each unit conducted the exercise separately with identical scenarios. The results would later be compared in a joint debrief that became one of the most significant doctrinal discussions in NATO's special operations history. Let me tell you about the units involved because their histories shape everything that happened. Delta Force was created in 1977 by Colonel Charles Beckwith after he spent a year on exchange with the British SAS. Beckwith recognized that the American military lacked a dedicated counterterrorism unit and built Delta to fill that gap. Delta selection and training are among the most rigorous in the world. The unit has conducted countless successful operations across multiple theaters. Their hostage rescue credentials include operations that remain classified but are known within the special operations community as textbook examples of successful rescue. The British SAS has been conducting hostage rescue operations since before the term was formally defined. Their modern counterterrorism capability was forged in the fires of the Northern Ireland conflict and announced to the world during the Iranian embassy siege of 1980, when the world watched black-clad operators seal down the embassy facade, breach windows, and rescue hostages live on television. The SAS became the global standard for hostage rescue. That operation, lasting just 17 minutes, rescued 19 of 20 hostages and killed 5 of 6 hostage-takers. It remains studied in military academies worldwide. GSG-9, the German unit, built their reputation on the 1977 Mogadishu aircraft rescue, where they successfully freed 86 hostages from a hijacked Lufthansa aircraft. German precision engineering applied to hostage rescue produced a unit known for methodical, technically perfect operations. These 3 units represented the best of NATO's hostage rescue capability. The exercise was designed to push them to their limits. Nobody anticipated that one unit would fail so completely. The scenario began at 0300 hours. Each unit received identical intelligence briefings. 12 hostages held across multiple floors by 8 armed hostage-takers. Hostage locations were known approximately but not precisely. The hostage-takers had demonstrated willingness to execute hostages and had already killed 2 during the initial seizure. Intelligence suggested they would begin executing remaining hostages at dawn. The rescue had to happen before first light. Time was critical, but not the only factor. Hostage survival was the evaluation criterion. Delta Force conducted their operation first. Their approach was textbook American doctrine. Simultaneous, multi-point breach, maximum speed, overwhelming violence of action, neutralize all threats in minimum time. The team split into 4 elements, each responsible for 1 floor. Breach charges were placed. Flashbangs were prepared. At H-2 seconds, all charges detonated simultaneously. The breach was perfect. All entry points compromised within half a second of each other. The teams flooded into the building with the precision of a machine. Hostage-takers began falling within 3 seconds of entry. The violence of action was extraordinary. 8 hostage-takers were engaged and neutralized in under 30 seconds. By any conventional measure, the assault was flawless. The problem emerged in the after-action analysis. 3 hostages had been hit by training rounds. 3 fatalities in a 12-hostage scenario. 25% casualty rate among the people the operation was designed to save. What happened? The answer lies in the speed-precision trade-off I mentioned earlier. In the chaos of simultaneous multi-mute breach, the assault teams were moving so fast that positive identification of targets was compressed into fractions of seconds. 2 of the hostage casualties resulted from cases where hostages were positioned near hostage-takers and the split-second engagement decision proved incorrect. 1 hostage casualty resulted from a through-and-through round that passed through a hostage-taker and struck a hostage behind. I want to be very clear about something. The Delta operators made no individual errors. They executed their training perfectly. Their target identification was as fast as human neurology allows. Their marksmanship was exceptional. The 3 hostage casualties were not the result of incompetence. They were the result of a doctrinal approach that prioritized speed and violence of action in a scenario where that approach carried inherent risks. The Delta team leader was devastated in the debrief. These operators trained relentlessly to avoid exactly this outcome. The simulated deaths of 3 hostages represented a failure that would haunt any professional regardless of the doctrinal justification. But the failure was not individual. The failure was systematic. The doctrine designed to minimize hostage-taker response time had maximized the risk of friendly fire. If you are finding this analysis valuable and want to understand the deeper doctrines behind special operations, hit subscribe right now. I release detailed breakdowns like this every week. And next week, I am covering why certain NATO units have developed completely different approaches to building assault and the shocking results when these approaches were tested against each other. You do not want to miss it. But right now, let me tell you what happened when the SAS conducted the same exercise. The SAS approach was immediately different, and the difference was visible from the planning phase. Where Delta had planned simultaneous multi-point breach, the SAS planned sequential breach with controlled flow. Where Delta emphasized speed, above all, the SAS emphasized what they called deliberate speed. Fast, but not so fast that precision was compromised. Their assault began at 0315 hours. The first difference was breach timing. Rather than simultaneous entry on all floors, the SAS entered the ground floor first, establishing a foothold before additional teams entered on upper floors. This sequential approach sacrificed some speed, but provided something valuable in return. It allowed each team to operate without the chaos of simultaneous action throughout the building. Each team could focus entirely on their sector without concern about friendly fire from teams on other floors, operating on the same compressed timeline. The second difference was movement technique inside the structure. Delta teams had moved through the building at maximum speed, engaging threats in fractions of seconds. The SAS teams moved at what observers described as controlled aggression, still fast by any normal standard, still violent when violence was required, but with fractionally more time allocated to positive target identification. The third difference was engagement doctrine. Delta doctrine emphasized center mass engagement with rapid follow-up shots, maximizing the probability of immediate incapacitation. SAS doctrine for hostage rescue scenarios emphasized headshots whenever possible. reducing the risk of through casualties, but requiring marginally more precision. The SAS operation took 47 seconds longer than Delta's. In hostage rescue, 47 seconds is an eternity. That additional time theoretically gave hostage takers more opportunity to execute hostages. That was the risk of the SAS approach. The result, all 8 hostage takers neutralized. 0 hostage casualties. All 12 hostages rescued without injury. The 47 additional seconds had not resulted in any hostage executions because the SAS teams had maintained such complete dominance of each room they entered that no hostage taker had time to pivot from surprise to action. The controlled precision had not sacrificed speed in any way that mattered. It had sacrificed speed only in ways that reduced risk without enabling hostile response. GSG-9 performed their operation third. Their results fell between the two. 53-second operation time. 1 hostage casualty from a through engagement. Their doctrine was closer to the SAS approach but with slightly more emphasis on speed. The single casualty suggested they had not quite achieved the precision balance the SAS had demonstrated. The joint debrief lasted 6 hours. The term total disaster was used specifically in reference to the Delta outcome, not as an insult but as an honest assessment of what a 25% hostage casualty rate would mean in a real-world operation. If this had been an actual rescue, 3 innocent people would be dead. The families of those hostages would not care about breach timing or movement speed. They would know only that their loved ones went into a rescue operation alive and came out dead. Now let me explain why this happened, because it is not about one unit being better than another. It is about institutional history and doctrinal development shaped by different operational experiences. American counterterrorism doctrine was heavily influenced by the experience of Operation Eagleclaw, the failed Iranian hostage rescue of 1980. That failure was primarily a result of logistics and mechanical breakdown, not assault tactics. The lesson American planners took from Eagleclaw was that speed and decisiveness were critical. Get to the objective, execute the mission. Do not allow delay to enable enemy response. This lesson was valid for many scenarios. It shaped a doctrine that emphasized aggressive action and rapid execution. The subsequent decades of American special operations reinforced this doctrine. Iraq and Afghanistan provided thousands of operations where speed and violence of action proved decisive. Direct action raids against high-value targets rewarded aggressive tactics. The enemy was killed or captured, and American casualties were minimized through aggressive tempo that overwhelmed defensive response. This operational tempo became embedded in unit culture. British counter-terrorism doctrine evolved differently. The SAS spent decades operating in Northern Ireland in an environment where collateral damage had strategic consequences. Every innocent casualty was an IRA recruiting tool. Every mistaken engagement was a political disaster. The SAS learned to operate with precision that minimized unintended consequences. This was not about being gentler. This was about being more precise, because precision had operational value. The Iranian embassy siege reinforced this lesson. The SAS hostage rescue was conducted live on television with the entire world watching. Any hostage casualty would have been broadcast globally. The pressure for precision was immense. The operation succeeded because precision was achievable at speed. The lesson was that you did not have to sacrifice precision for speed if your training was sufficient. Subsequent SAS hostage rescue operations, many of which remain classified, continued to refine this doctrine. The premium on precision remained. The training evolved to make precision compatible with speed, rather than accepting a trade-off between them. This doctrinal difference played out directly in Operation Certain Freedom. Delta executed American doctrine perfectly. That doctrine was optimized for a different problem set. SAS executed British doctrine perfectly. That doctrine was optimized specifically for the hostage rescue problem set being tested. Here is what makes this comparison uncomfortable for honest analysts. You cannot simply declare one doctrine superior. In a scenario with fewer hostages, more separated positions, and clearer sightlines, the Delta speed advantage might have produced 0 casualties and faster resolution. In a scenario requiring extended building clearance with ongoing combat, the American emphasis on aggressive tempo might prove essential. The SAS approach was superior for this specific scenario. That does not make it universally superior. What the exercise revealed was that doctrine must match scenario. The American doctrine was designed for raids where the objective is eliminating hostile forces. It had been adapted for hostage rescue but not fully optimized for it. The British doctrine had been specifically developed for hostage rescue scenarios where hostage survival was the primary metric. The specialization showed, let me tell you what changed after this exercise, because the real value of training failures is what happens next. American Special Operations Command took the results seriously. There was no defensiveness, no excuse-making. The Delta operators and their commanders analyzed exactly what had happened and why. Several changes emerged. First, an increased emphasis on hostage rescue as a distinct mission set requiring distinct techniques rather than an adaptation of direct action doctrine. Second, additional training time specifically for close-quarters scenarios with hostage complications. Third, doctrinal review of engagement criteria in hostage-proximate environments. Fourth, expanded exchange programs with British forces to understand their approach from the inside. The British took lessons as well, though different ones. The 47-second differential represented risk that had not materialized in this exercise but might in others. The SAS examined whether their approach could be accelerated without sacrificing precision. They studied the GSG-9 performance to understand the middle ground between the two approaches. The real winner of Operation Certain Freedom was not the SAS. The real winner was NATO. The exercise had revealed a doctrinal gap that could be addressed in training rather than being discovered in a real-world operation with real hostages dying. Every lesson learned in that exercise building was a lesson that did not have to be learned with innocent blood. This is what professional militaries do. They test themselves honestly. They acknowledge when something does not work. They learn from allies who have developed different approaches. They improve continuously. The American Special Operations community that emerged from this exercise was stronger than the one that entered it, precisely because they had experienced failure in a training environment. I want to address something that viewers might be thinking. Does this mean Delta Force is inferior to the SAS? Absolutely not. In a different scenario with different parameters, the outcome might be completely reversed. Consider a maritime interdiction requiring rapid clearance of a large vessel. Consider a compound assault where hostage locations are precisely known and separated from hostage takers. Consider a scenario where extended building clearance requires sustained combat rather than precision rescue. In these scenarios, the American emphasis on speed and violence of action might prove optimal. What Operation Certain Freedom demonstrated was not relative unit quality, but doctrinal specialization. The SAS had specialized in hostage rescue for decades. Their doctrine was refined through countless operations where hostage survival was the measure of success. Delta had developed primarily as a direct action force that could also conduct hostage rescue. They also showed this specialization difference reflects strategic reality. The United States faces a broader range of special operations requirements than the United Kingdom. American Tier 1 units must be prepared for missions across the entire spectrum of special operations. This breadth requires accepting that optimization for one mission type may mean sub-optimization for another. The British, with a smaller military and more focused requirements, can afford deeper specialization in specific mission types. Neither approach is wrong. Both reflect rational responses to strategic circumstances. What matters is that when specific capabilities are required, the alliance can draw on the unit best suited to provide them. In a real-world hostage rescue with complex civilian placement, NATO planners now know to consider British participation or British techniques integrated into the operation. Let me tell you about the evolution of combined doctrine because this is where the story becomes hopeful. Since Operation Certain Freedom and similar exercises, American and British units have developed increasingly integrated approaches to hostage rescue. Exchange programs have expanded dramatically. British liaison officers work with American units during training cycles. American operators spend time with SAS training cadres, learning precision techniques. The result is a convergence of doctrine that takes the best from both approaches. American units have integrated more precision-focused techniques for hostage-proximate engagement. British units have studied American speed and violence of action for scenarios where that approach is optimal. The combined NATO hostage rescue capability is now stronger than either national capability alone. This integration extends to actual operations. Joint training means that American and British operators can work together seamlessly when real-world hostage rescue is required. The compatibility of techniques means that a combined force can adapt its approach based on specific scenario requirements, drawing on American tempo when appropriate and British precision when appropriate. Consider what this means for real-world hostages. If a terrorist group takes Western hostages anywhere in the world, the rescue force that responds may include operators from multiple nations with complementary capabilities. The entry teams might use British precision techniques while American speed is applied to securing the outer perimeter. The integration produces capability that no single nation could provide alone. This is what NATO is supposed to be. Not a competition between allies but a combination of allied strengths. Exercises like Operation Certain Freedom exist precisely to identify where those strengths lie and how they can be combined. The temporary embarrassment of exercise failure is a small price for the permanent benefit of improved combined capability. The operators who participated in this exercise understood this. The Delta team that experienced the simulated hostage casualties did not resent the SAS success. They studied it. They learned from it. They integrated those lessons into their own development. That is what professionals do. That is what makes Tier 1 units Tier 1. Not never failing, but always learning. I want to leave you with a thought about what this comparison reveals about military excellence. The total disaster in the title of this video refers to a training outcome, not a unit's capability. The disaster was that a doctrine optimized for one mission type proved suboptimal for a different mission type. That disaster was valuable because it illuminated something that needed to be addressed. Every military unit that has ever achieved excellence has gone through failures that shaped their development. The SAS hostage rescue capability that proved so effective in Operation Certain Freedom was built through decades of operations, including operations that did not go perfectly. The Iranian embassy siege that made the SAS famous included moments that could have gone differently. The perfection that the world witnessed was the product of lessons learned through imperfection. Delta Force continues to be one of the most formidable special operations units on Earth. Their capabilities across the full spectrum of special operations are unmatched. The hostage rescue scenario in this exercise was one specific test of one specific capability. It revealed an area for improvement. That improvement is ongoing. The Delta Force that would conduct Operation Certain Freedom today would perform differently than the unit that performed it years ago because the lessons have been integrated. This is the nature of military excellence. It is not a destination, it is a process. The units that remain excellent are the units that continue learning. The units that stagnate are the units that believe they have nothing to learn. American Special Operations has never stagnated because it has never believed it had nothing to learn. Every exercise, every operation, every exchange with allied forces produces lessons that drive improvement. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. Next week, I am releasing an analysis of why German mountain troops and British commandos developed completely opposite approaches to Alpine operations, and what happened when they went head-to-head in a NATO exercise. The results will challenge everything you think you know about mountain warfare. The week after that, I am examining a special operations comparison that nobody has covered in this depth, and I think it might be the most important video I have released yet. Drop your comments below. Tell me which Elite Forces comparison you want to see next. I read every comment, and your suggestions directly shape which topics I prioritize. If you learned something from this analysis, share it with someone who would appreciate understanding how special operations really works. Not the movie version with perfect heroes and clean victories, but the real version with honest failures and continuous improvement. Remember that the measure of an elite unit is not whether they ever fail. Failure in training is inevitable and valuable. The measure of an elite unit is what they do after failure. Do they make excuses? Do they deny the results? Do they blame the scenario? Or do they analyze, learn, and improve? The units that do the latter are the units that save lives when the mission is real. And the hostages are actual human beings whose survival depends on operators who have learned from every failure and incorporated every lesson. The total disaster of Operation Certain Freedom was a training event. The total success that followed was the improvement that training event produced. That is what exercises are for. That is what professional military forces understand. That is why honest assessment and continuous learning matter more than any single exercise outcome. Until next time, remember that in hostage rescue, the only metric that matters is innocent lives saved. Everything else, the tactics, the techniques, the doctrine, exists to serve that single purpose. The units that remember this are the units that bring hostages home. The units that forget it are the units that create the disasters that haunt operators for the rest of their lives. The SAS remembered it in Operation Certain Freedom. American forces learn from that reminder and continue to develop their capability every day. Together, they make the world safer for anyone who might someday depend on a rescue that executes perfectly when perfection is the difference between life and death.